Buster Douglas. If there was ever a moment where boxing's universe tilted on its axis, it was this one. Mike Tyson, the most feared man in combat sports, walked into the Tokyo Dome on February 11, 1990, as the undisputed heavyweight champion. He was on a winning streak of 37 wins and 0 losses with 33 knockouts as he steamrolled through former champs like Trevor Berbick, Larry Holmes, and Michael Spinks. He wasn't just winning, he was destroying legacies, and his opponents were not fighting to win, they were fighting just to survive. And then there was James Buster Douglas, a 29-year-old underdog who came in with a respectable but unremarkable record of 29 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. Most people didn't even think he'd make it out of the first few rounds, and Vegas gave him 42-1 odds. The Tyson camp barely trained for him as the world was already looking ahead to Tyson versus Holyfield. On paper, this fight was a formality. Mike Tyson was undefeated, undisputed, and untouchable, while to many, Buster Douglas was a fringe contender. Solid, sure, but no one gave him a shot. Not Vegas, not the media, and not even his own promoter, Don King. But what no one saw was the storm brewing inside Buster. He had nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Just 23 days before the fight, Douglas lost his mother. He could have backed out and nobody would have blamed him. But instead, Douglas turned grief into fuel and brought something into that ring Tyson had not faced in years. Real hunger. He came sharper, leaner, and more focused than ever. And when the bell rang, he didn't just survive, he dominated. From the opening bell, Douglas showed he wasn't there to be a statistic. He pumped his jab, stayed mobile, and made Tyson look like a guy who skipped training camp. For round after round, Douglas kept Tyson on the end of that jab, snapped in uppercuts, and even beat Tyson in the clinch. He didn't run, he didn't flinch. He stood his ground and boxed with confidence. Tyson, used to breaking opponents early, started unraveling when Douglas didn't fold. By round 5, everyone watching had the same shocking look. Wait, Buster is winning. Then came round 8 when Tyson used his last gasp. He landed one of those signature brutal uppercuts and sent Douglas to the floor hard. For a second, it looked like the story would end the way everyone expected, but the crowd held its breath as Douglas rose at the count of 9, and that changed everything. By round 10, Tyson was exhausted, battered, and confused. Douglas smelled weakness, and he unleashed a savage uppercut followed by a textbook 4-punch combo. Right, left, and Tyson went down hard. For the first time ever, Tyson couldn't beat the count. He was on his knees, desperately searching for his mouthpiece as the ref counted him out. When the referee counted 10, the world stood still. Mike Tyson had been knocked out by Buster Douglas. Just like that, one of the biggest upsets in sports history, the invincible myth of Iron Mike, was shattered. Douglas didn't just win, he rewrote what people thought was impossible in the heavyweight division, and it forced the boxing world to remember a brutal truth. No one is invincible. But if Douglas exposed Tyson's vulnerability, the next man exposed something deeper, and did it twice. Evander Holyfield. By 1996, Tyson was back and the aura was almost restored. After spending 3 years behind bars, Tyson returned to the ring in 1995 and crushed Peter McNeely in 89 seconds. He bulldozed Frank Bruno to regain a portion of the heavyweight crown, then wiped out Bruce Seldon in under a round. The world believed Iron Mike was back, but there was one man who wasn't buying the hype. Evander Holyfield. The real deal had moved up from cruiserweight and already captured heavyweight gold. He was battle-tested, fearless, and strategic. But after a series of brutal wars, including 2 losses to Riddick Bowe and a recent defeat to Michael Moorer, most fans even feared for his safety, while experts believed Holyfield was damaged goods and past his prime. He was a 6-1 underdog. The Tyson camp thought this was just a tune-up before bigger fights. Well, they shouldn't have. Because what the world forgot is that Holyfield was never built on hype, he was built on heart. Evander came in with a plan: don't be afraid, and don't back down. From the opening round, Holyfield stood toe-to-toe with Tyson, neutralizing the bully. While most of Tyson's opponents froze, Holyfield used angles. He fought dirty when needed. Clean when it counted, he literally used his head to frustrate Tyson, and constantly clinching to smother Tyson's power. Every time they separated, Evander made him pay. Stiff jabs, sneaky hooks, and brutal bodywork. By round 5, it was clear. This wasn't a scared man. This wasn't a tune-up. This was a dismantling. Holyfield dropped Tyson in round 6 with a short counter that rocked the champ. Tyson got up, but the damage was done, not just physically, but psychologically. From that moment, the predator had become the prey. Holyfield kept the pressure on, making Tyson miss and punish him for every mistake. Tyson grew frustrated, then recklessly followed. He lunged, threw wild haymakers, and started walking into punches. The MGM crowd was stunned. Then came round 11, and Holyfield unleashed a flurry of unanswered punches that left Tyson covering up in the corner. The ref had seen enough, and he waved it off as a technical knockout, and Tyson's aura of invincibility gone again. But this time, it wasn't a fluke. Evander Holyfield didn't just beat Mike Tyson, he outclassed him. He stood in the fire, stared down the monster, and never blinked. And here's the kicker. After the fight, Tyson didn't complain, he didn't cry foul. He simply said, he was the better man tonight. And just like that, Holyfield became the second man to ever beat Mike Tyson and the first to stop him in a championship fight. Holyfield's win wasn't luck. It was strategy, toughness, and determination. He stood toe-to-toe with one of the most feared men in sports history and made it look like a sparring session. But Tyson wasn't done yet, he wanted revenge. And just when you thought that was the end of it, the rematch turned into one of the wildest nights in boxing history. A night that left Holyfield bleeding and Tyson banned. Evander Holyfield, again. You'd think after getting thoroughly outboxed the first time, Tyson would come back with a better plan. But in truth, he came back with a worse one. One that would turn their rematch into one of the most infamous nights in sports history. The build-up to Holyfield Tyson 2 on June 28, 1997 at the MGM Grand Las Vegas was electric. After all, the first bout wasn't just a title fight, it was a humbling of one of boxing's most terrifying legends. Tyson's team claimed headbutts had played a big role in the outcome and demanded a rematch. Fans expected a full-blown war, but they got something far weirder instead. Round 1 started tense, and Tyson looked sharper, faster, and more aggressive, but Holyfield still had the answer. He clinched, tied Tyson up, used his head and elbows masterfully, and stayed in control. Then came round 2. A headbutt from Holyfield opened a cut over Tyson's right eye, but the ref ruled it accidental. But to Tyson, it wasn't an accident, it was disrespect. And Iron Mike doesn't take disrespect lightly, as round 3 would go down in boxing history. In the clinch, Tyson leaned in, clamped down on Holyfield's right ear, and bit a chunk out of it. Holyfield jumped back in shock and pain, bleeding and yelling to the referee. Chaos erupted. The crowd went wild and officials debated stopping the fight. Then, in a decision that still baffles many till today, the bout continued. But Tyson wasn't done. Moments later, in another clinch, he bit Holyfield's left ear, but this time, it was over. Referee Mills Lane disqualified Tyson, ending the fight in the 3rd round and sending boxing into a frenzy. Fans hurled objects at the ring. Commentators were speechless and security flooded the arena. Tyson didn't just lose the fight, he lost his composure, his license, and a massive chunk of his reputation. The Nevada State Athletic Commission came down hard. Tyson was fined $3 million and had his license revoked indefinitely, though it was reinstated the next year. Commissions across the country updated language on intentional fouls, conduct policies, and disqualification protocol. Even broadcasters and sponsors distanced themselves as Tyson became more than a former champ. He became a cautionary tale. Holyfield stood calm, bleeding, confused, and victorious again. This wasn't just a rematch. It was a moment that redefined both fighters. Holyfield as the unshakable warrior, and Tyson as the man who let his rage devour him. But Tyson wasn't done yet. His next challenge would come from a towering Brit who would show the world what cold, calculated dominance really looked like, with Tyson at the other end of his punch. Lennox Lewis. By 2002, Mike Tyson was chasing one last shot at glory. He wasn't the wrecking ball of the 80s anymore, but the name still sold tickets and the mystique still lingered. So when he squared off against Lennox Lewis, the reigning WBC, IBF, IBO, and lineal heavyweight champ, the world held its breath. Could Iron Mike summon the old magic one last time? Lennox Lewis wasn't buying the hype. Standing 6 feet 5 inches with a long reach, devastating right hand, and Olympic gold pedigree, Lewis was built to dismantle brawlers. But what made him special was his discipline. Where others feared Tyson's aggression, Lewis stood calm behind his jab and executed a masterclass in how to nullify chaos. From the opening bell, Lewis dictated everything. He kept Tyson on the end of his jab, forcing him to lunge just to get close. Every time Tyson tried to slip inside, he met a cross, an uppercut, or got tied up. Tyson looked frustrated and confused, like a lion that suddenly realized it was the prey. The punishment was slow and methodical. Lewis didn't just beat Tyson up, he broke him down, piece by piece. By round 6, Tyson was bleeding. By round 7, his face was swelling. And in round 8, Lewis dropped the hammer, a crushing right hand that sent Tyson to the canvas for the final time. He beat the count, but it was over. Referee Eddie Cotton waved it off and Tyson didn't protest. It was the first time Iron Mike had ever been knocked out cold. Lennox Lewis didn't just win, he erased the myth, showing the world that Tyson could be neutralized, dominated, and finished with precision. In the post-fight press conference, Lewis put it bluntly, "I wanted to finish his aura." And he did. If you've made it this far, you're clearly a boxing fan. Please hit that like button and subscribe. I've got plenty more coming your way. But even after that humbling defeat, Tyson wasn't ready to walk away. He still believed he had one last run in him, until a British underdog proved to him that belief was just a memory. Danny Williams. By 2004, Mike Tyson was no longer the myth. He was still a dangerous puncher, but the fear and the aura was starting to fade. At 38, Tyson was trying to claw his way back after 2 straight losses and a long layoff. Then Danny Williams stepped up, a British heavyweight with decent credentials, but he was seen as little more than a stepping stone. And what happened next shocked the world. The first round looked like vintage Tyson. He came out firing, crowding Williams with brutal hooks and uppercuts as Williams looked overwhelmed. The crowd roared, thinking they were about to see Iron Mike turn back the clock, but something was off. In the opening round, Tyson tore the cartilage in his left knee, a crucial injury that robbed him of his mobility. And as the rounds wore on, it started to show. The explosiveness was gone, the defense evaporated, Tyson was there, but it was clear a large part of him was missing. Danny Williams, smelling weakness, did what so many Tyson opponents never had the courage to do. He stood his ground. He steadied the early storm, then started throwing combinations, uppercuts, even body shots. Tyson wasn't moving like the predator he once was. He was standing, absorbing, and slowly fading away. In the 4th round, the unthinkable happened. Williams backed Tyson up against the ropes and unleashed a flurry of unanswered punches. And Tyson dropped to the canvas, not from one devastating shot, but from accumulation, exhaustion, and injury. Time was catching up to him and the ref counted him out. It was the first time Tyson had ever lost to a man considered a heavy underdog in the twilight of his career. The world didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of the end. Tyson's body couldn't keep up with his heart. And this time, there was no ear bite, no foul play, and no drama. Just a fighter who couldn't fight like he used to. For Williams, it was the pinnacle of his career, but for Tyson, it was a moment of painful clarity. His time had passed. But even after that crushing loss, Tyson still had one final round left in him. One last name to add to the list. And this man ended the Tyson era for good, sending the legendary Iron Mike into retirement, one exhausted round at a time. Kevin McBride. By 2005, Mike Tyson wasn't the same Iron Mike who stormed the division in the 80s. He was older, slower, and emotionally worn down by years of legal trouble, financial collapse, and personal chaos. But still, it was Tyson. There was always a chance he could turn back the hands of time with just one punch. Then came Kevin McBride, a relatively unknown Irish heavyweight with a 6'6" frame, a solid jab, and absolutely no fear. From the opening bell, you could see the difference. Tyson came out with flashes of his old aggression, bobbing and weaving, trying to get inside McBride's long reach, but McBride wasn't intimidated. He kept Tyson at bay with stiff jabs and leaned into clinches, using his size to wear the smaller Tyson down. As the rounds progressed, the crowd grew uneasy. Tyson's footwork faded. His head movement slowed and he stopped throwing in combinations. By round 4, McBride was walking Tyson down. By round 6, he was bullying him in the clinch, pushing his weight onto Tyson's shoulders and leaning against the ropes. Then came a brutal sequence. Tyson tried to break free, throwing an intentional headbutted, causing a cut above McBride's eye, and the ref docked 2 points. At that point, Tyson's frustration had boiled over. At the end of round 6, Tyson slumped on his stool and told his corner, "I'm done." And just like that, one of boxing's most terrifying careers came to an end. Not with a knockout, but with a whisper. McBride wasn't flashy and he wasn't fast, but he was the final man to stand across from Mike Tyson and win. Not because he outboxed him technically, but because he outlasted him mentally. The boxing world was stunned. The headlines weren't about McBride's victory, they were about Tyson's retirement. Iron Mike admitted afterward he no longer had the passion to continue and refused to disgrace the sport by fighting for paychecks. And yet, for McBride, that night would define his career. No world title and not even a belt. But he would be the last man to beat Mike Tyson. But just when you thought that was the curtain call, nearly 20 years later, Iron Mike stepped back into the spotlight and met a YouTuber who would shock the world, Jake Paul. By late 2024, Mike Tyson wasn't the undefeated champ of the 80s anymore. He was a 58-year-old legend coming out of retirement, nearly 2 decades away from pro boxing to face Jake Paul, a 27-year-old YouTube star turned boxer with a record of 10 wins and 1 loss, an army of fans, and a flair for spectacle. The matchup was billed as entertainment, but the outcome became historic. Originally scheduled for July, the fight was moved to November due to Tyson suffering an ulcer flare-up on a flight. The undercard was filled with curiosity acts, but the world focused on one question. Could this influencer really beat Iron Mike? The first 2 rounds suggested nostalgia, as Tyson landed some shots and Paul showed respect. But by round 3, Tyson's age and rust became glaring and Paul began to dominate with volume punching and clean combinations, outlanding Tyson significantly. 78-18 punches by fight's end. By round 8, it was obvious. Paul wasn't rolling over, he was scoring, connecting, and controlling pace until the final bell dropped on an 8-round war of attrition. All 3 judges scored it for Jake Paul, 80-72, 79-73, 79-73, a unanimous decision. Despite the relatively low action, Paul walked out the winner and global scrutiny followed. Over 65 million viewers tuned in via Netflix, making it the most streamed sporting event ever. Tyson, recovering from a serious ulcer and blood transfusions earlier in the year, later admitted he almost died before the fight, a powerful reminder that this was more than just a spectacle. This wasn't just Tyson's swan song, it shook boxing's foundation. Sporting regulators, especially in Texas, reassessed rules around cross-generational matchups, medical clearances for older fighters, and broadcast standards under pay-per-view umbrellas. In-ring doctors and state commissions now add stringent age-based health checks. Athletic commissions worldwide are tightening sanctioning rules for fighters past 50, a change sparked by this crossover moment. Jake Paul didn't just win a fight, he rewrote the conversation on boxing's future, celebrity matchups, and how legends can and maybe shouldn't re-enter the ring. And with that, Tyson's unbeaten streak in professional boxing ended for the 7th and final time. It wasn't a punch that stopped him, it was time itself. And there you have it. The 7 men who didn't just beat Mike Tyson, they became part of his legacy. These weren't just wins, they were turning points in history. If you enjoyed this breakdown, give it a like, drop a comment on which fight stunned you the most, and remember to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.